What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Schlyde into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schlyde, aka Schlyde, and on this show, we talk about college sports, the trickle-down effect of NCAA rules and regulations, as well as some other headliner sporting events that are happening right now. Recently, we've been focusing a lot on the headliner things like NBA playoffs, NFL draft, other playoffs, like that are in professional sports, like MLB, which is not in playoffs right now. The regular season for MLB just started. But today, we are kind of going back a little bit on the rules and regulations because there are some big things on that. We also have NFL draft news. The NFL draft concluded last week, and there was definitely some winners and losers that we're going to be talking about today as well. And we've got a couple of quarterbacks, one former, one possibly soon to be former college quarterback on the downfall. So let's start off with the NFL draft here. So Indiana gets their first ever number one overall pick with Fernando Mendoza. They also had their first ever draft where they had more than one member of their team selected in round one. So Fernando Mendoza got selected at number one. Omar Cooper Jr. was that second player who got selected at number 30. Omar Cooper Jr. is going to the Jets. Fernando Mendoza going to the Raiders. Now, Fernando Mendoza going to the Raiders, that's not really news to anybody, at least anybody that's been listening here. But Omar Cooper to the Jets, that was one of the places he was projected. Some people had him projected, I think, going to maybe Cleveland or maybe even the Cowboys or the Steelers. Those are really the teams that people were thinking that Omar was going to be going to, but he ended up going to New York Jets. And speaking of the Jets, that's actually one of the winners of this draft that I wanted to talk about, because the Jets, a lot of people were a little bit confused by the David Bailey pick on edge, but you have to remember that their head coach, Aaron Glenn, is a very defensive-minded guy. He's a very defensive-focused coach. So picking defense at number one was crucial, especially considering the fact that last year the Jets did not have a single interception. They didn't receive a single interception last year in any of their games. So that was a clear sign that they needed to upgrade their defense. And boy, did they. They pick up David Bailey from Texas Tech at number 2. They picked up some weapons on offense, too, in the first round. They picked up Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon, tight end. They pick up Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. And then the other defensive pick that I like a lot, especially based on what was being talked about on just all over the internet, was Aaron Glenn picking his mini-me, or his younger me, D'Angelo Pons. They both have a very similar playing style. They both played CB. So very, very great pick for the Jets, I think, as well. D'Angelo Pons is just an absolutely amazing player. I mean, just because he's small, it just does not matter at all. He is super physical. He's super fast. Amazing, amazing player. But Jets just absolutely killed it in the first couple of rounds. Another team that I had as a winner in this NFL draft, which might be surprising to some people, and it hasn't really been talked about all that much, is actually the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas, they made a smart pick. Their first pick was number 11 in the draft. They picked up Caleb Downs, safety from Ohio State. Really, really great pick for Dallas. They're really beefing up that defense just with this pick alone. And then they picked up Malachi Lawrence, an edge from Central Florida. Also a really great pick for the Cowboys as well. Again, just really beefing up that defense. Then moving on into the second round for Dallas, they picked up Where'd it go? No, actually, they didn't have a pick in the second round, but later on in the draft, they make other really great picks. They pick up Jaysean Barham from Michigan, an edge. Again, really focusing on building up that defense, which it's not a bad move. Defenses in the NFL are starting to get a lot more stronger. Like it's a lot harder for offenses to perform against these defenses. You also look at their fourth round pick. They picked up Devin Moore from Florida, a center back. And they also picked up LT Overton from Alabama, an edge. I mean, they really just beefed up that defense in their draft. And maybe that's kind of part of their plan. They already have Dak Prescott. They already have CeeDee Lamb. They already have a pretty elite offense. And you definitely could make the argument that they maybe could have picked up, Mekhi Lemon just to really beef up that offense just a little bit more, give Dak another weapon to throw to. But I think beefing up the defense, absolutely smart move. You can never go wrong with beefing up the defense because at the end of the day, it's like they always say, defense wins championships. So that's why I have Dallas as my second winner in this draft. And I'd say a close third winner would be the New York Giants. And it's mainly because of their first two picks in this draft, just because they had two top 10 picks due to making trades, but they had the number 5 pick and the number 10 pick. They picked up Arvell Reese, linebacker from Ohio State, really talented player. And then they also pick up Francis Mauigoa from Miami, offensive tackle, who is an absolute beast on the line. So New York Giants making some pretty crucial picks there. They could have easily choked it away, but they picked up some pretty solid players. And I think first year under John Harbaugh, I think should be a pretty decent one, especially with the offensive pieces that they already have there. That's part of the reason why they went more on the line for both defense and offense, just because, you already have Jackson Dart and Jameis Winston at the quarterback position. You've already got Cam Scatterbo at running back, already have elite wide receivers. Don't really need to go and grab those kinds of positions. You really just need to beef up the lines, give your quarterback more protection, beef up the defense so that way it's even more difficult to score. But these two players that they drafted in their top 10 picks are going to have an immediate impact on this roster. 100%. I have no doubt about that. We are going to be seeing both of these guys on the field at some point this year. Probably first game. Wouldn't be surprised at all. But yeah. Now moving on to the losers of the NFL drafts. This first one, may be surprising just because, we've seen a lot of recent success from this team. They've made a couple of Super Bowls recently, but they haven't won one. And that team, of course, that I'm talking about is the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know what it is with the 49ers. They just haven't really been great at drafting the past couple of years. There's just something about what they're doing. I mean, they know how to trade and pick up elite players in free agency, but when it comes to the draft, it's just not where they shine. It's just not where they shine at all. Dejon Stribling, wide receiver from Ole Miss, not a bad player, but that's somebody that they could have easily picked up later. There were still other wide receivers that I think other teams would have been looking at first, to the point where Dejon Stribling could have been a steal for the 49ers a little bit later in this draft. The 49ers actually didn't have a first round pick in this draft. They were one of several teams that did not have a first round pick, again, due to trades and stuff like that. So, they had the first pick in the second round. That was Dejon Stribling. Then they don't have a pick until round 3. the 70th pick overall, 6th pick of the third round. They pick Romello Height, edge from Texas Tech. Not a bad pick at all. I think that was probably one of their better picks, to be quite honest here. Moving on, though, you've got Kalen Black, who got picked, which, I'm an Indiana guy. I love Kalen Black. Amazing running back, amazing player, super underrated, and arguably a steal for the 49ers. But at the same time, they already have an all-star running back in Christian McCaffrey. So why double down on the running back position when probably need more wide receivers, at least when it comes to offensive skill positions? I think San Francisco they need more wide receivers, especially all the drama that they already have with their current wide receivers. So I would have gone wide receiver at some point if I was the 49ers. But yeah, they did not do that. Let's see. I don't think they picked a single wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken. Just looking at the draft board right now, I mean, I'm going down to 4 or 5 and haven't seen them pick a single wide receiver. Going over to 6th round, they still haven't picked up a wide receiver yet. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with the wide receiver position, because I think that's a weak point that they currently have on their team, is the wide receiver position. So yeah, 49ers did not pick up a single wide receiver. That's not what I would have done. That's for sure. But yeah, just moving on to the next loser, though. And this one, I think, is worse than the 49ers. And they could have easily put themselves in a much better position. But, well, they didn't. And that team that I'm talking about is the Cardinals. So, the Cardinals didn't pick bad players. I'm not saying they picked bad players. The thing with the Cardinals is that they didn't really address needs that they had when they should have addressed them. Okay, so hear me out for a second, right? You look at the Rams. They pick up Ty Simpson off the board for quarterback position. Now, if I was the Cardinals, I would have picked Ty Simpson at number 3, because you trade away Kyler Murray. You don't have a solid starting quarterback right now. Why not pick up the next best quarterback behind Fernando Mendoza in this draft to immediately address this need? But no, they pick up Jeremiah Love, running back from Notre Dame. And again, Jeremiah Love is an amazing player. I have loved watching him play. He is again, stellar player in contention for the Heisman. But they don't really need, Arizona doesn't really need a running back. They have depth at that position. They didn't need to pick up Jeremiah Love. It didn't address any of their needs. Whether it be, and their needs were the quarterback position, offensive line, and really just anything on defense, to be quite frank. But yeah, just did not address the position there. But, maybe they address something later. Let's go to round 2 and see what the Cardinals do, right? We go to round 2. They pick up Chase Basantis, Texas A&M, offensive guard. And that solid pick. I mean, he was one of the top players in the SEC, one of the top players at the position, at the offensive guard position. But they could have, again, that was actually a decent pick for the Cardinals right there. But then, moving on to the 3rd round, they pick up Carson Beck. So they address the quarterback position. But again, like I said earlier, they could have had Ty Simpson. Who I think is a bit more mobile, which is better when you don't have as strong of an offensive line. I think Ty Simpson also can sometimes be a better decision maker. Carson Beck sometimes makes questionable decisions. Carson Beck does have a pretty high football IQ, though. So I think picking him was definitely the next best option if Ty Simpson was taken off the board. But again, if they had picked Ty Simpson at number 3, this wouldn't have been an issue. They could have then picked a defensive tackle. They could have picked an edge. They could have picked an offensive tackle. They could have addressed the line when they should have addressed the line. I mean, heck, you even go back to the first round and you look at Tampa Bay, they picked up Reuben Bain Jr. Arizona could have had Reuben Bain Jr. They could have immediately boosted up their defense by a ton, but no, they picked Jeremiah Love, who, again, very talented player, but I just don't think he's going to have as much of an impact because of how bad Arizona's offensive line is. There's not going to be a lot of gaps for Jeremiah Love to work with. And that's one of the main reasons why I have Arizona, why I'm down so much on the Cardinals, because of those top 3 picks that they had, or their 3 picks that they had in those 3 rounds. Just not ideal. I mean, they do end up picking up Caleb Proctor, defensive tackle from Southeastern Louisiana. Not a bad pick. But yeah, I mean, it's just those top picks mean a lot. They mean everything in the NFL. So, I mean, they didn't pick terribly afterwards. I mean, they pick up Reggie Virgil from Texas Tech. Not a bad pick, at least at that point in the draft. But with a team like Arizona, you want players that are going to have an immediate impact on your roster because of where you were last year. That's what makes the draft so important. That's why they have the picks up so high. That's why teams like Arizona, like the New York Jets, like the Raiders, who didn't really perform all that well in the regular season, have high draft picks. That's why they're in the top 10 this year. A quick little point that I actually would like to make, and this is kind of a joke on Cleveland, but this also kind of boosted Cleveland's draft stock a little bit for me. They drafted another quarterback. Don't know why. They have a ton of quarterbacks now. They have Dylan Gabriel, Shadur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, and now they have Taylon Green. They drafted Taylon Green in the first for their first pick of the 6th round, the 182nd overall pick. And honestly, that is a quarterback that would have been a steal for a team like the Cardinals. They could have picked Taylon Green. I mean, Arkansas had one of the most potent offenses in the country last year. Their record definitely doesn't show that because, well, their defense just was lacking in so many different areas, and they just could not keep up. They couldn't hold any kind of lead for the offense to work with. But Taylon Green is also a freak athlete. I mean, we talked about his combine numbers a few broadcasts ago, about a month ago at this point, where we look at his 4.4, his vertical. He is a freak athlete. And if a team like the Cardinals picked him, where they don't really have a great offensive line, but you have a really fast and mobile quarterback that can be a dual threat, Taylon Green would have been a great pick for the Cardinals. But yeah, they end up not doing that. So yeah, I guess that's a big loss for the Cardinals. And again, that's why I had Cleveland up a little bit higher on my draft board, at least when it comes to winning and losing. But there was also one other shocking thing that happened with the NFL draft, and that's more of a exclusion, a notable exclusion actually from the NFL draft. And I'm of course talking about Diego Pavia. Now, Diego Pavia, Heisman finalist, Heisman runner-up, actually, to be more accurate. But Heisman finalist, expected to go drafted, has a draft party, which now everybody is clowning online, and understandably so, because Diego has been kind of a prick the past, well, I don't even know. Has it just been forever? Or has it just been this year? Who's to say? Not me. But, a lot of people are talking about whether he was overrated in college or underrated by NFL scouts. And I think, to be honest, I think it's a little bit of both. But the reason why I think he didn't get drafted, there's a bunch of reasons why I wouldn't have drafted him. And some of it has to do with, like, one of the reasons is the size and the speed, like, just not the most impressive physically. And the other reason is his attitude, the way he handles himself off the field, the way he went about the Heisman ceremony when he lost. He could have easily taken it with grace and handled it a lot differently, but instead he goes to a club and there's F Indiana signs and he's flicking off the F Indiana signs, like kind of an agreeance, goes on Instagram, makes posts saying F the Heisman voters, just, goes off the rails, essentially, which very unappealing for general managers on NFL teams. And then more recently, he makes comments on Barstool Gruden's show, The Quarterback Camp, where he basically, like, in each episode, he talks with a quarterback that declared for the draft, like each quarterback that declares for the draft, and essentially tries to help them boost their draft stock. It's an opportunity to boost your draft stock, essentially, and learn a few things along the way as well from a now former NFL head coach. And one of the comments that Diego made on Gruden's show was the reason why he didn't have an agent. And he talked about how he didn't want to have an agent because he didn't want them taking 5 to 10%, which, if you don't know anything about how NFL agents work, you're thinking, okay, you know what, that's understandable. That's not a terrible take. But then you dig into it a little bit more and you find out that, NFL agents or player agents can only have 3% max of whatever the player is making. So Diego Pavia, after that comment, just kind of makes himself look like an idiot, right? So even though on the show he demonstrates his knowledge of the game of football, he also shows his lack of knowledge in terms of financial regulations and other regulations that the NFL has, which can lead to, again, going back to NFL GMs, if you have a player that's a nightmare out off the football field where they're doing all kinds of crazy things like drunk driving or going on high-speed chases or, other scandals that happen off the field, and it turns into a PR nightmare. And I think that's another reason why NFL teams were just turning away from Diego Pavia, was because in addition to not being the physical stature that they ideally would want him to be, he also is a PR nightmare. So really, that's too many strikes for Diego Pavia. And I think he probably could have been drafted if he was less of a PR nightmare, because he's a talented player. I'm not going to deny that. But, if you already have your size and your physical stature and your speed kind of going against you, do you really want your personality and other aspects of yourself going against you? No, that's not ideally, that's not what you want when you're trying to get drafted by an NFL team where there's only 257 picks for you to land. And this whole PR thing, it was talked about last year with Shedeur Sanders, where some of the comments that he was making, not necessarily online, but more in the individual meetings that he was having with NFL GMs, he would say certain things to certain teams that he wanted to get drafted to, say other things to other teams that he didn't want to get drafted to, and was really immature throughout the whole process, and then gets drafted really low by Cleveland instead of being in the first round like he was projected to be. And people were clowning him online too because he was kind of acting like an idiot. So if last year wasn't a lesson to future NFL prospects, hopefully this year is a lesson to look at and be like, okay, maybe we don't act like complete idiots to, like, just in general, so that way NFL GMs and coaches look at us for our talent. I mean, that's what I would do if I was a, if I was a future prospect or if I was a future hopeful prospect, but that's just me. But yeah, before we talk about the other soon to be former, possibly college quarterback, we're going to take a quick little break, and I have a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schlyde at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com.
Okay, so this story actually just became, like, this morning, this story broke. Well, kind of last night, a little bit this morning, a little bit more of this story broke this morning. But Brennan Sorsby is currently in an investigation for gambling. And this broke last night. But the part that broke this morning was that there's a possibility that Brennan Sorsby could be permanently banned from college football, which is huge. And normally, like, I've talked about how I don't really talk about the transfer portal, at least this early on in the year when we've just barely started, not really making any early predictions. But Brennan Sorsby, so he's currently the quarterback at Texas Tech. He's their starting quarterback. He was one of the top players in the transfer portal, one of the top 10 highest paid players from the portal, actually. And recently he got caught gambling, and he said, and the part of the story that broke last night was that he is going to therapy, like he's getting treatment for it. And normally when you see something like that, that typically means that they're trying to punish themselves, essentially, so that way they could still continue playing college football. It's not a guarantee, though, because, again, the investigation is still going on. But it says Brennan Sorsby under investigation after reportedly placing thousands of sports bets. So that's a high number. Thousands of sports bets through a gambling app, including bets involving Indiana games during his redshirt year there in 2022. So this goes back almost 4 years. He's now on indefinite leave from Texas Tech Red Raiders and has entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. Reports say that there's no indication he tried to influence outcomes, but NCAA rules still prohibit athletes from betting on college or pro sports. So essentially, one of the big no-nos that Sorsby committed was that he was betting on his own team back in 2022. He wasn't playing on the field, but he was still betting on his own team. The other no-no is just the betting in general, whether it's like outside of your own team, outside of your own games. For college athletes, you can't bet on college sports or professional sports. So you can't bet on NBA, you can't bet on NFL, can't bet on NHL, MLB, none of them. You can't do it. But why is this huge? He was expected to be Texas Tech's starting quarterback. He was a great fit going in. You know, he's a dual threat quarterback. He can run the ball if he has to. He's also got a great arm as well. And he also has big NIL money attached to him. Obviously, like I just said earlier, he was one of the top 10 highest player, not just at the quarterback position, but just in general, one of the highest players heading into this year. And now this whole story could kill his potential future in the NFL draft. I mean, we were just talking about the draft and how, you do stupid things, then you're going to face some consequences. Well, looks like we might be seeing that a little bit earlier than what happened with Shadur and Diego Pavia. So another lesson to be learned here or at least for college football players for years to come. I mean, it seems like there's always some story like this that comes up that creates some discourse. But yeah, NCAA gambling rules can mean permanent eligibility loss. Like I said before, just because he's seeking treatment doesn't necessarily mean that he's guaranteed to play next year. So my question to you guys is, should addiction treatment affect how the NCAA handles the punishment? Because if he does need help, does the NCAA punish the player or support the player that's going to get help for themselves? Now, it really depends, because you could look at this in the sense of, well, he's just saying he's getting treatment for the PR, so that way the I guess metaphorical blow online won't hurt as bad, and he could still maybe get drafted next year. But if he's not allowed to play, then that definitely will have an impact on his draft stock, because he's not going to have there's going to be a whole set of data points that is going to be missing for these NFL teams. I mean, the more you play, the better chance you have of getting drafted. At least I think, because there's a lot more data points for NFL teams to draw from, to look at, to analyze, to figure out if you are the right pick for them. And I guess another question that I have for you guys is, if he bet on his team to win and didn't play, does that matter? I mean, I think it kind of matters, just because he could make the bets. The thing that matters, though, is if he tells his teammates that he makes these bets, that could affect what the team does in each of those games. Like, if let's just say one of Sorsby's bets was Indiana wins by 10.5, and there's 2 minutes left in the game, they're up 7 to whoever they're playing, and Brendan tells his teammates, hey, I bet the over on 10.5. Can you guys score a touchdown real fast? And they go and score the touchdown, even though it's kind of garbage time. That can affect the outcome of the game. That can easily affect the outcome of the game. So I think, depending on the circumstance, I think it does kind of matter. Because if he's going around telling his teammates about the bets that he makes on them, they might try to do things to make the outcome go in his favor. Maybe they get a cut. Maybe they don't get a cut. Who knows? But again, that's why there's so much controversy around this, is because, even though you're on the bench, you're not playing, whatever, you're still a college athlete. The rules say that you can't gamble. You can't place bets. If you're placing bets, like, it's illegal. You can't do it. So I think it does matter. Like, the betting in this case is a form of influence to his teammates to either perform a certain way or not perform a certain way. Just kind of going back to the one scenario that I mentioned before, let's just say let's just say Brendan picks Indiana to win by 3.5, and maybe a field goal would be enough to put Indiana over the edge. So let's just say Indiana's still up 7. Wait, no, so I guess it would be under 3.5. So let's just say Brendan Sorsby places a bet on Indiana to win by under 3.5. They're tied. Well, no, they're not tied. They're up a field goal, so they're still under that 3.5. And they're in field goal range. This could seal the game possibly for Indiana. Maybe. It would at least force the other opposing team to have to score a touchdown. And Brendan told his team, hey, like, I made a bet on you guys to only win by 3 points. Maybe don't go for the field goal. And then they decide, you know what, we're not going to go for the field goal. Maybe they decide to do something crazy on 4th down, and it doesn't go their way. And then, oh no, Indiana wins by 3. Brendan Sorsby gets his payday. Maybe he pays. Wow, I can't speak words. Maybe he pays some of the other players that helped achieve the outcome, at least the desired outcome that was on the bet that Sorsby made. That's also a possible scenario as well. So I think it does matter. And I think right now, the way the NCAA is handling it, at least the gambling side, I think is relatively fair. Now, I think, betting on professional sports, I don't necessarily mind it if college players are betting on professional sports, or if, I think that's one where it gets a little bit loose, just because the professional sports doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with their performance or performances in their college career. At least when in terms of gambling, those two are pretty disconnected. But when it comes to college sports, I think, college athletes betting on college sports should not be allowed. I think that, that's kind of where my line is. And I'm not necessarily saying that the NCAA should change that, but I think the professional sports side, I understand why there's a little bit more debate on college athletes being able to bet on professional sports rather than college sports. So, yeah, some people go extreme and say, well, college athletes should be able to bet on any sport that they're not playing in, including college sports. Like a college football player would be able to bet on a college basketball game. I don't necessarily agree with that. Just because if you're placing bets associated with your school, that could be a little conflicting. Maybe you're friends with or related to somebody on another team that's in your school. A little bit of conflict of interest for, the athletes that are participating. So, yeah, that's kind of why I have my line where I have my line. And speaking of NCAA eligibility rule changes, this is another big one. This happened over this weekend, but the president of the NCAA Charlie Baker made some comments about the eligibility. And we had talked about eligibility last week a little bit. We talked about the executive order. In previous broadcasts, we've also talked about the executive order, some of the inconsistencies of that executive order when it comes to eligibility, just with the ages, how the executive order might be difficult to enforce as an executive order, and that somebody would have to take some kind of next step, whether it be, a lawsuit on the executive order or the NCAA doing something about the executive order and taking things from the executive order and making them rules within their own organization to make them enforceable, or a bill. So the Senate and House coming together to pass a bill based on the executive order. Those are some scenarios that would need to happen. And it's looking like the NCAA is the one that is going to be taking the lead on this, because what happened is the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, he had some statements on the eligibility model. Said 5 years in 5 years. So let me just kind of break down what that means here real fast. So athletes would get up to 5 seasons of competition within a strict 5-year window. The clock of that window would start after high school graduation or when they turn 19, whichever comes first. So let's just say you graduate high school early, like Malachi Toney, for example, from Miami. Graduates high school early, starts his college career at 17, or at least I think that's when he started it. Yeah, if he graduated early, he would have started at 17. So that's when Malachi Toney's 5-year window would start, at least under these new rules and regulations, this new eligibility model, the 5 years and 5 years. So Malachi Toney would have eligibility up until he was 22. Or 23 if he turned 18 really early. But most likely, eligibility would end when he turned 22. Now, if you're 19, so this would be the max amount that you could go up to. So if you're 19, you get 5 years. Let's just say you graduate high school, take a gap year. Or I guess in this case, like if you turn 19, this would be if you didn't graduate high school or you're graduating high school late, whatever. Again, 19 is the highest age that you could be. So that would mean your eligibility window would end when you turned 24. So if you're 24, that's it. No more eligibility after 24. Which I think is good. I think this is good for multiple reasons. I think it keeps people within a more college, like a typical college age range. I think also it adds clarity to what was said on the executive order, because it was not this specific on eligibility, which I think is great. It also sets some clarity on things that would be eliminated, like super seniors or COVID year style extensions, JUCO loopholes, older international athletes entering late, and constant waiver chaos. So basically, college athletics would actually happen during the college years, just like I said. And that is the logic that's being pushed right now within the NCAA, which I think is good. This won't be retroactive. So that means current athletes already using extra eligibility years would not lose them. This would mainly affect future athletes entering college, which is a huge part of the conversation, because if this is a new thing that's happening, who is this all going to affect? Is this going to affect the people that already have their extra years or not? In this case, it clarifies that it does not, which I think is fair. I mean, you look at a player like Trinidad Chambliss who won his cases against the NCAA to get his extra year, and the draft just concluded. And right after the draft concluded, this new rule is getting put in place. So if it was enforced on a player like Trinidad, he would have missed out on the NFL draft. And I think that's one of the main reasons why the people that have the extra years aren't losing them, because then that brings on a whole other set of lawsuits that players can bring upon the NCAA that the NCAA will probably lose, considering the trend of some of the cases, especially when it comes to eligibility in football, because it would negatively affect the players' careers. So my question to you guys about this is the NCAA finally fixing college sports, or is it creating new problems? Because I think, like in my personal opinion, I think it restores some fairness. Now, other people think it hurts late bloomers, JUCO players, transfers, or athletes who need more time financially. Either way, I think it's going to reshape college football, but maybe, at least for some of these scenarios, maybe there's some way where, at least on a financial standpoint, there could be some kind of forgiveness. I mean, there's apparently infinite money to be thrown around to a lot of these players, so, or at least that's been thrown around to a lot of these players. So why not just throw an infinite more amount of money, I guess? I mean, like, I feel like money for players is becoming less and less of a problem, at least when it comes to college football, which I think is good. Like, if money's not a problem, then that's one less problem that you have to deal with, right? All right, so the last thing that we're going to talk about really fast is the NBA playoffs. Now, some of these have been a little bit surprising, others not at all surprising. I mean, I'd say the one that's been the least surprising is Oklahoma City sweeping the Phoenix Suns in the first round of the playoffs, winning all 4 of the games. Really not that much of a surprise. They traded away Kevin Durant earlier this season for Dylan Brooks, essentially. I mean, there's a little bit more to that trade than that, but that's essentially what the trade was. But yeah, I mean, I think Phoenix is trying to get a stronger defensive player than Kevin Durant. Also open up some cap space because Dylan Brooks isn't as expensive as Kevin Durant. But ultimately, Oklahoma City, they end up taking the series. Minnesota is up 3-2 against the Denver Nuggets, which is kind of surprising. But when you consider the fact that Jokic got injured during one of the games, it kind of makes it a little bit less surprising. Minnesota does have a really talented team, though. So like I could consider Minnesota being a dark horse in this playoffs, at least on the western side of the bracket. Lakers are up 3-1 against the Rockets, so the revenge scenario is looking less and less likely for Kevin Durant. Lakers just need to win one more game. They don't even have Luka Doncic playing because of his hamstring, and they're still dominating the Rockets for the most part. So not great for Houston. But besides Kevin Durant, Houston has a pretty young team, but they also don't really have a deep team. So, yeah, just not really great predicament for Houston right now. San Antonio is leading 3-1 over Portland. Not really surprising. To be honest, I was kind of surprised Portland was able to get one game out of San Antonio, but San Antonio just has to win one more game, so we'll see how that goes, but not entirely optimistic for Portland here. Something that is really surprising, though, in this series is Orlando leading, the Detroit Pistons 3-1 in their series. And Detroit, they're the number one seed in the East. They were the number one seed in the East, and they're down 3-1. I mean, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad if you ask me. But obviously Detroit can still come back and make something happen, but it's not looking too good right now for them. New York Knicks and Atlanta Hawks are tied to 2, and so is Cleveland and Toronto. Those are the only 2 teams right now tied at 2 apiece in their series. It's been pretty back and forth for all 4 of these teams, which I can't really say that I'm surprised. At least for the Knicks and the Hawks, just because the Knicks have a new head coach. This is his first season coaching the Knicks. Atlanta Hawks, they have a relatively deep team, or at least a deeper team than most people thought heading into this playoffs. So I think Atlanta, kind of like with Denver, I could see Atlanta at this point being a potential dark horse, could maybe upset Boston if I'm assuming that Boston gets past the 76ers, which it's really looking like it. They're up 3-1 right now in their series. But yeah, kind of looking more at the games that are coming up. We have 3 games today. We've got the 5th game of the 76ers versus Celtics. That's going to be played today at 6. There's also the Hawks versus the Knicks. That's going to start at 7. That's also game 5 of that series. And then we have the 3rd game for today, the final game of today, which is game 5 of the Portland versus San Antonio game. That's going to start at 8:30. Now, I think San Antonio, like just kind of starting up with that one, I think they should take it. It's at San Antonio. It's in their home court. They've got 1 game left, so I think they probably end up taking this one. Wemby is also just an absolute beast, and he's been putting up crazy stats this playoffs. So I really like the Spurs in this final game of the series, assuming that it's the final game of the series. If the Spurs do win, it will be the final game of the series. Kind of moving on to the Knicks Hawks. I'm kind of liking the Hawks. The Knicks, they took kind of an early lead in this series, and then the Hawks were talking a little bit of trash, saying that the Knicks play like they're in a theater with the flopping. Comments were mainly directed at Brunson. But yeah, Jalen Brunson is what it is. I mean, people talk trash, make comments, whatever. That's just kind of the name of the game. But ever since then, the Hawks they've been winning. So I don't see why that would change. I guess it's at New York, but otherwise I don't really see how that's going to change anything. Then you look at then we've got the 76ers versus Celtics, and I mean, just looking at this series by itself, it doesn't feel like the 76ers are really going to do too much, especially after what happened in game 4. They lost 128-96. I mean, the Celtics just absolutely dominated them. So really not liking the odds for the 76ers here. This final game is going to be played in Boston. So the 76ers were able to get their 1 win in Boston, so maybe they get their win there. But I imagine that Boston is looking to close out this series as soon as possible before they have to play either the Hawks or the Knicks, because both, I think, could bring some tough competition to Boston. But yeah, NBA playoffs, kind of like last year, a little bit more surprisingly entertaining than I think the playoffs have been in years prior. Last year was definitely entertaining just because, we had the Pacers as the underdog story. We had two small market teams make it to the championship. I think that was huge. It was amazing. I was here for it. I love watching the small market teams succeed. But yeah, I know that the commissioners, the people in charge, don't necessarily like that too much. But sorry, that's not in the best interest of, the people watching, or at least, the casual fan. I mean, I'd say I'm a casual when it comes to NBA. It's more or less just because I watch more college ball, but part of the reason why I know really anything about the NBA is because of college basketball. So, like, some of the younger talent that's going to eventually, take their spots where they're meant to, it'll be better. But yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some interesting scenarios that could play out with this NBA playoffs. Obviously, Boston, Atlanta, I think would be a very interesting set of matchups. If Orlando wins, Orlando could be a team that makes it to the semifinals. It's possible. I mean, especially if Boston loses in that next series, if they lose to either Atlanta or the Knicks, I mean, that could really make something huge. That would be ideal for Orlando to make it to the championship. As an 8 seed, by the way, an 8 seed. I mean, come on. It's absolutely insane. An 8 seed making it to the NBA championships. Just wow. I mean, you don't really see that often at all, but yeah. But that being said, that's all that we have time for today. Next week, there's going to be, we're obviously going to be talking about NBA playoffs. NHL playoffs are starting to kick off a little bit, so we are, or not even a little bit, but a lot. It's been pretty feisty, so we are going to get into that next week. We've also got MLB. We're going to be talking a little bit about MLB, and if there's any other college sports rules and regulations stories, like the Brennan Sorsby story or the 5 years and 5 years eligibility story, we will be talking about those as well, because again, like I said at the beginning of the broadcast, that's kind of our thing here. That's one of the big things that we talk about consistently. So we're going to have to touch up on that as well. And if there's any other breaking stories regarding the enhanced games, we're also going to be talking about those as well. Enhanced games is now coming up in less than a month. Talked about it last week. Likely going to be talking about it again next week. But yeah, if you want to go back, listen to previous broadcasts, or if you want to get, like, if you for some reason aren't able to listen on the normal Tuesday time or the normal Friday time, can always listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Millions.co, Patreon, and other podcasting platforms. If you search up Schlyde into Sports, it should just pop right up. Even just in your Google browser, you can search up Schlyde into Sports, and it will give you all the options. I also am on social media. Instagram and TikTok are primarily what I'm on. Every once in a while, I'll go on Twitter, but I haven't been on Twitter lately. I just really haven't had the time to peruse Twitter, or I guess X. I always just call it Twitter. I'm kind of old-fashioned that way. X is just such a lame name for, I say this all the time, but X is such a lame name for a platform. I'm sorry, I don't like it. It's stupid. It's a letter. It's not the name for, it shouldn't be the name of a platform. Twitter was fun and it made sense. But yeah, that's just kind of my take on social media right there, or at least Twitter right there. But again, kind of like with the podcasting platforms, if you search up Schlyde into Sports, the socials should pop up as well. But yeah, that being said, I'll see you guys all next week. Summer is starting to really come around, so enjoy that summer weather. And with that being said, Schlyde out.